It's a new world. The students, they want to work from remote places. They want to have flexibility to travel. So if you can speak to that as an entrepreneurship program and you can embrace it, I think it's super healthy for any age to get out of your bubble from time to time, to go out and see how the world's solving problems. But when you get into a situation where there are no jobs and you're expected to go find a job, you've got to be resourceful and resilient. So what I saw in Europe, and Stockholm was probably the most progressive, and of course they were known as the capital of the unicorns. What they're doing that's different than what we're doing here is they're doing a very intense, coordinated effort to combine creativity, engineering, and business. It's two polar opposites, but the creativity part is sort of the glue, the binding agent.
Welcome to another episode of Forging the Future. And today we have a special guest whose journey in the world of entrepreneurship and education has been nothing short of inspiring. Joining us is Shelly Brenckman, a pioneer at Texas A&M University and a driving force behind the startup Aggieland and beyond. Shelly's passion for lifelong learning and her commitment to supporting the next generation of innovators make her a perfect guest for today's episode. We'll be diving into her journey, the lessons that she's learned, and her vision for the future of entrepreneurship. Shelly, welcome to Forging the Future.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you here, and I know this is going to be a great conversation because we already had some conversation pre-show, and I loved it. So Shelly, I know you're an entrepreneur, so tell me a little bit about your journey before you got into starting, or helping startups.
I started my first company at 10.
Wow.
It was a newspaper for the neighborhood.
Okay.
And so I went door to door selling my newspaper. And then I started a big block carnival, and I charged people to participate in the carnival. So I did that from 10 to 11. I got students to work for free so they could attend the carnival. Bought penny candy and sold it at a markup. And so I don't know what prompted me to do that. I like fun, I like entertainment, I like bringing community together. So I guess that was evident at the time. And I like controlling the message too. And I think that was probably the impetus for the newspaper. I liked it. I wanted to connect people and the children in the neighborhood.
So you ran your own newspaper?
I ran my own newspaper.
You weren't like delivering the city newspaper?
No, I made my own newspaper.
Wow.
We were military families. They were working at Washington, D.C. at the Pentagon. But with the parents coming and going, the children were not meeting each other. And so I thought, well, let's talk about these cool kids and what they're doing. And so that's what I did.
And you did all the writing?
I did all the writing.
And then did you print it out?
My dad printed it for me.
You would type it probably back then?
Yeah, it was a typed newsletter, and I didn't know how to type at the time. But I would handwrite it, and then he would have my mom transpose it, and then he would go print it. And,
nice.
It was short-lived. I mean, I did it for probably the summer. But I learned, from dealing with people and what people want to see and what they want to consume.
And what did you name your carnival? Did you have a name for it?
Probably Oxen Hill Festival or something like that. And I have done that throughout my entire life as far as community building. Is we throw a party, we build a barn. We do things that bring community together and make people a part of the community. Everybody gets a responsibility so they feel a part of it. And that's all I was doing. It was just started early. I don't know what possessed me, but that's what I did. So, and then from there, I launched little small businesses all through school. I worked multiple jobs. I was a worm bagger for a marina on the weekends. And
what's a worm bagger?
It's someone who reaches down into a bin of worms and puts them in a worm bagger.
All right.
I was actually called a harbor boy, but once I overcame the squeamishness of getting minnows or worms into bags, it was a fun job. But I did that on the weekends, delivered pizzas at night, worked for the dean in engineering as a draftsman, and so I was always working there. We didn't have scholarships, and my parents were strapped, so. We had to fend for ourselves as far as my sister and myself. But I started launching these side hustles all through college, did contract work, did a lot of what we called freelancing back then, graphic arts, drafting, and things like that. I worked on a desalination plant during college for a Houstonian who was, doing stuff in Abu Dhabi, and I couldn't go there. My mom wouldn't let me go, but it was great pay, and so I was always hustling.
Do you think that that hustle spirit is like in someone's DNA, or is it? I think one person I had on the show described it as entrepreneurship as a virus. It's something you catch. What's your opinion?
I think it's both. I think there's natural-born DNA entrepreneurs. I've always believed that. You can spot them usually when you've been doing this as long as I have. But there's also a nascent entrepreneur who doesn't know they're an entrepreneur, and you can spark that with the right care and feeding. So I do believe everyone has a tendency towards self-preservation, and that's kind of what entrepreneurship is in some ways. You're looking out for yourself first as a founder, and then you're looking out for a whole lot of other people as well, if you're smart.
So at 10, do you feel like you got sparked, or you were just one of those natural?
I was DNA. It was in my family's genes.
Okay.
Everyone in my family was an entrepreneur of some sort.
So Shelly, you've had an impressive journey with A&M and beyond, but let's fast forward a little bit to just before getting involved in startup Aggieland. Tell me a little bit about that.
Okay. Well, I had a company for 20 years, and I exited the company about the time my daughter was a freshman in high school, and I'd missed a lot of her journey as a student. My parents had helped raise her, and so I took off all of high school, the 4 years, and got real involved with her and her sports and her school district. The school district was at risk and didn't have a lot of equipment, no lab equipment, no books in the library, so I made that my full-time job, was fundraising. And I ended up doing golf tournaments, festivals, club drives for a 96% free lunch district, because my premise was my daughter's playing tennis in these really poor courts in the school district, hadn't been built since the 70s. And the children that were living in the neighborhood around the court were running up when the balls were hit over the fence and taking the balls. And so that told me that they want to be involved in stuff, but they don't have the equipment. So we did tennis racket drives. There was a neighboring lake community on the other side called Bentwater. They stepped up, gave us thousands of golf clubs, golf bags, a lot of them new. And so we were able to equip have golf teams at both junior high and high school. So those are the kinds of things that were entrepreneurial, but they involved fundraising because there was no funds for that. They didn't do field trips, so I raised money for field trips. When my daughter went off to college, that first year I was still winding down my role as, sports club booster and whatnot. And I just got super bored. My parents died. I needed a change of scenery and a mindset shift. I didn't want to think about grief and death. And my mother, on her deathbed, had said, please get your degree. I got my ring, but I didn't have the diploma because I got a job offer from Bechtel. It was just too good, and my parents, needed me to go ahead and take that. So I went back to A&M, and I didn't tell my family. I didn't tell anybody in my family that I was.
And how old were you at this point?
That was 2010. And so I decided I was going to finish out my degree, and I thought I could knock this out. I've just got 6 months or a year left. Well, going back to A&M, my degree program was eliminated. But for fun, I had taken a whole lot of business courses, and so they said, we're going to put you in May's Business School, and it'll be your fastest route out. But they couldn't find my records because they were on microfiche. So I ended up there for 3 years. During that time, there was a class I took with a professor, a very entrepreneurial professor. He was, at that time, the only professor on staff who had run a company. He had a bricks and mortar business that was very, very successful, and he made us do profiles. And so I put on there that I was, for the 4 years, I've been raising millions of dollars for not just our school district, but also the neighboring school districts, because that was kind of the quid pro quo, is you give me rackets and golf clubs and help with our fundraisers, and I will raise for you too. And I did. And so when he found out the amount of money that I'd helped raise, he said, I've got a challenge for you. And there was a program called Ideas Challenge, and it was going to be in its 10th year, and they had run out of money. And it was, if you remember back around 2010, there was economic collapse, basically. And so he said, we don't want to not have this if we can, but we need $500 to have it this year. And so I went out in the parking lot at Mays, and I made 4 calls, one of them Austin Ventures. And Austin Ventures was in the process of shutting down. And they said, sure, we'll give you $10,000. And then I called an oil man I knew from my neighborhood, and he's like, yeah, I'll give you $5,000. And so in 4 hours, with 4 phone calls, I had $15,550, which helped support some of their events beyond what they thought. And they were like, okay, we need your help. And right away I was asked to go over and was hired as Vice President of Development for Aggie Angel Network, which they rebooted in 2010, knowing that I could help. And so my network was in Houston, because that's where I'd worked and lived. And I brought in a bunch of Houstonians, Robert Allen being one, and had them come up and see what we were doing technology-wise at the university and, the potential. Because if you think about it, we're really in Houston's backyard, and at some point those are going to converge. So it seems like a natural. And he got it. He flew in his helicopter and landed right next to the buildings. That was kind of exciting. He liked to make a big splash. But that's what I did. So I helped grow the network from about 12 men, 2 of them from Houston. And I learned a lot from those guys. That was David Wesson and Mike Potter with Geodynamics, which sold to oil states, with Cindy Taylor, also an Aggie. So I helped them reboot Aggie Angel Network, and then they realized, okay, we need something for our own homegrown startups. We don't have that pipeline of talent. And David Wesson said, I'm not going to give another dime to the university unless we launch an accelerator. And the university's position was basically, well, faculty don't want it. They're focused on research right now. This is seen as a luxury because of the times, and we don't want it siphoning off donor money. And so in the group that was kind of pioneering this, championing this, it was 5 faculty, and they said, okay, we're going to get students to do it. And I was a student, and they found 3 more non-traditional students, were called non-trads, and then 8 normal undergraduates. So we were all undergraduate level. And we had to learn, what do you do? But I had been in a co-working space with my company when I first started out. And so I had the basic premise for it. And then we started visiting Capital Factory and Longhorn Startup Lab, which was ahead of us by about 6 months. And StartX, which is out in California, which launched about the same time. And they're one of the more successful student startups for student startup accelerators. And so we did a lot of quick research, and then I was like, yes, we can do this. And, we may have to end up writing the business plan ourselves, the professor and I, Don Lewis, which actually ended up happening the day before we were supposed to present it to the university. The students were like, oh, we got homework. And so we ended up there till 4 a.m., and then he went to a copier place because we were printing it out. And we had no equipment. I mean, everything we were doing in this space, which Blake Petty got for us, it was former HP space, it was surplus, everything.
We had no startup for startups.
It was a startup for that's exactly what we called it. It was a startup for startups by Aggie entrepreneurs for Aggie entrepreneurs at the student level initially. Once we opened our doors, though, in January 2012, we started in November of 2011. By 2013, January 2013, when we had our official ribbon cutting, I don't think it was in January. It may have been a little bit, I have to go back and check the dates, and you may not want to put that in. But there was so much excitement because, as one student put it, the university has taught me, he's a senior, the university has taught me how to go get a job, but there are no jobs. What I needed was someone to teach me how to create my own job. And so that's what ended up selling the university on this. If you can self-support, which we were entrepreneurs and we said, yes, we can. We didn't know where we were going to get it from, but we weren't charging. It was free. The students would come in. We didn't look at their intellectual property, but we trained them. And then we were very heavy, 98% on engineering students, not by choice, just that's who showed up. But when you get into a situation where there are no jobs and you're expected to go find a job, as we are in now, students are graduating and they're getting their offers rescinded, their internships are getting delayed as much as 2 years. You've got to be resourceful and resilient. And so there's very much a need, again, for that type of program at the university and other universities. It's very important. We, as a freelance mindset, I was always freelancing. I knew if I lost a job, I wasn't going to starve to death. If you don't have that mindset or you were never exposed to it, you end up on the food line, right? You don't know what to do. And so I think it's incumbent upon universities and good communities to demonstrate and make available resources and guidance to its people, its community, and its campuses. How do you find a job once you've lost your job? How do you find a job if there's never been a job available to you? And there's all, kinds of ways to do this, but one of the ways that I know is you create your own job, you create your own, control your own future.
It is a different kind of mindset. I think it's something maybe that I've always had myself. Part of it is confidence in your ability to get a job, and part of it is, understanding that kind of getting a job is like a base level that you can always go back to, for me. And so many times in my own journey, I've chosen entrepreneurship over job hunting, right, or getting a job. And then also, I've explained even to my own kids that, like, if you don't have a job, your job is to get a job. And that's a 40-hour-a-week or more job. It's like you're not out there hustling and applying and trying to interview and, and I just see so many of them are lost in that kind of thing. And it's both a plus and a minus that so much stuff is online now, because it's like, well, you're just going to sit at home and do the applications and,
Cruise LinkedIn.
Yeah, so, right, and so it can be hard. But I like the idea of, basically teaching people to fish, right? So,
yes, absolutely.
And that's been lacking. I think even in traditional school, there's some of those, skills are lacking. Like, they don't teach you how to, balance your books or your checking account and some stuff that you really need. And, of course, the family should be also trying to do that. But, schools could be focused on at least partly teaching that.
Practical knowledge.
Interesting. So you went back, you got your degree, you got a business degree.
Yes.
And then you stayed in order to start up Aggieland.
To help run it, yes. I worked for the university. We decided that we needed a pipeline. The Center for Entrepreneurship on campus was basically working mostly with graduate students and MBA students, but they had no pipeline. And their numbers weren't enough to support an accelerator that was 4,000 square feet, 4,700 square feet of resources, but we were only getting engineering students. And so we had to beef up the business pipeline, and then we started focusing on the creative side and started going after architecture and liberal arts. But it was a step process. So one of the things that we did as a result of that constrained pipelines was to start a dormcubator. And at the time, it was really a new concept, and now everybody's got one. But we were one of the first in the nation, and the U.S. Commerce found what we were doing both on the accelerator, student-run accelerator, and the dormcubator side so fascinating because we were having such quick, rapid success. And they invited our university president to go to Washington, D.C. and discuss how we did it.
And what is a dormcubator? Is this the Michael Dell starting a business out of his dorm room kind of
Pretty
idea?
Much,
or
yes.
What's involved in the program?
We did a 48-bed. We could have done a 100-bed because it was a very selective program. We had to turn away a lot of students. But
so
it's
48 beds, 48 people?
Two to a room, so 24 rooms and 48 beds.
Okay.
They were freshmen. And so we were trying to target them early, not at the MBA stage. We were trying to get them and raise them up how we needed them to be and inspire them to be that way. We weren't going to force anybody to become a tech entrepreneur or a lifestyle entrepreneur, but we wanted to introduce them to the concepts. And so we offered several tracks for these students. They could become a social entrepreneur. They could become a consumer goods entrepreneur. They could do music and entertainment and arts. So creative entrepreneur. There was all different tracks like that. And if they didn't have an inclination, but they were forced into the dormcubator because their parents thought it was a cool idea, which happened every once in a we would offer them the opportunity to have a venture track, and we would teach them how to become a VC or how to work with funds. And so that was very popular.
Interesting. Some people would say, like, well, why bother? Probably especially back then. These kids don't have a college degree. They don't have an MBA. What do they know about running a business? Why even target them that early, right?
What we found out was that by throwing out the concept and opening up the door, the students found us, and they were finding us already, which is what prompted the dormcubator. Was we were having students that had launched companies, and we were seeing this in the entrepreneurship classes. They'd launched companies as sophomores and juniors that were making over 6 figures in revenue. Most of them were groundskeeping or some service-type business, but they wanted more. They wanted to know how to scale. They wanted to go into other types of areas. Some of them were already trading cryptocurrency, so they were looking at fintech. And there's just a lot of different interests. We had one fella, it was a huge moving boom in College Station. People were moving in from all parts. And he recognized that, so he provided a student moving service. He branded it out, had a mobile app so you could hire them on demand. And by the time of his senior year, he'd hired 32 people, mostly students, and 1 full-time manager. He'd paid off all his trucks. He'd paid off his student loans. And so he was an inspiration to a lot of our entrepreneurs because he did it in such a short time. But we had entrepreneurs that would get patents and then give up and just like, I'm not going to run this business. My patent's going to just, go on my resume. In one case, we had 3 freshmen launch a company called Shadowbox, and one joined the rugby team, one got a girlfriend, and so forth. And their junior year, there was a Fortune 500 company wanted in that space, and they offered them $750,000, $250,000 per person to buy their patents.
Wow.
And they never launched.
How did you go from the university not really being supportive of a startup effort or this program versus the MBA as a distraction to then even further along in the process saying, well, we want to get these students interested in entrepreneurship even earlier instead of like, hey, they're here to go to college and these guys are going to start businesses and maybe some of them are dropping out. How did you sell the college on that idea?
Well, first of all, our mantra was stay in school and get the Aggie ring and get the diploma, because you are not going to get these resources in the free world, right? That we're subsidizing everything you're learning here, making funds available to you. Graham Weston donated a small venture fund that the students in the venture track ran. And so these are expensive resources in the real world. So stay in school, get your degree, and build your network early, starting as a freshman. And if nothing else, you'll get a fantastic tech job, which is now a focus of a program called Aggies in Tech in Mays Business School, which is multidiscipline. So people at the time, they didn't understand tech entrepreneurship. They understood ag entrepreneurship. They understood engineering entrepreneurship, oil and gas. They didn't understand software entrepreneurship. Our computer science school was very, very small at the time. Mm-hmm. The way we overcame the objections from not channeling students to research or not channeling students to consulting was we talked about how this is your talent pipeline. We're getting them freshman, sophomore year. We're getting them to catch the virus, like you said, and then you can convert them to researchers or commercialization after they catch the virus. They're going to want to challenge themselves. They're going to want to grow from the bar apps and the mowing companies and the moving companies, and because every entrepreneur does. They typically, what's the next thing? What's the next challenge that I can face? And a lot of times it's research and commercialization.
So can you share a particular memorable story from startup Aggieland, and maybe explain what it taught you about the potential and challenges of student entrepreneurship?
Well, Startup Aggieland it was very unique because students ran it. So with students managing and just a little bit of adult supervision, you still run into issues, right? So I remember coming back from an event and walking down the hall, and I saw legs dangling from the ceiling. And I was like, hello, who's up there? And it was a student who had gotten locked out of her office, and so she was trying to crawl through the ceiling, and the ladder fell down, and she was stuck. And so we had to call one of the other students to come up and get her out, because I wasn't going to do it. But those are the things that end up with rules And so that was probably our big challenge. We didn't know what rules to make when we were doing it. We did put intellectual property rules. We had rules about generating revenue and being kicked out if you reached, I think it was $250,000 in revenue, things like that. But we hadn't we hadn't thought through the human element of running that type of program. So one of the things we started doing was in raising the bar every year, we started looking at archetype of users. And what is it that makes somebody entrepreneurial, or what is it that you can enhance in somebody that's entrepreneurial, and not just someone who's wanting to hang out and get free food, right? Because we did a lot of free food. It was cheap chicken, but it was free. So we started doing a little bit of data analysis of our intake. We had just been come one, come all, but we were learning too. And one of the things we learned when we did our selection process was we looked for people who were not risk adverse, because you can get students who they have great ideas, they want to do something, but they're afraid they'll lose their scholarships, or they're afraid their mamas and daddies will get upset because they're not going the corporate track. So you look for someone who is climbing mountains, who's skateboarding, who's kiting, who's surfing. Surfing was our number one. There's a lot of commonalities with entrepreneurs surfing. And then musicians were our number two, were they musically inclined. If you could get an extreme sports buff and a musician, it was magic. And then the third one we noticed was there was a genetic predisposition amongst twins. And so we ended up at one point with about 15 sets of twins, very entrepreneurial and fun. So there was things we looked for.
So you're passionate about supporting student entrepreneurs and doing that with now 1876 Ventures, right? So tell me a little bit about helping startups and pitching at South by and getting into Y Combinator and all that good stuff.
Yeah, this has been an awesome week for us. We had a team of recent graduates get accepted into Y Combinator, and for 10 years we have tried in Aggieland to get somebody into Y Combinator, at least through Startup Aggieland and what was RS Design Spark Innovation Center. And without success, we would get callbacks, and that was in recent years, but we even went so far when we first started Startup Aggieland to import a guy who had gotten a second callback, and we were so impressed by that. He didn't get in, but we were like, tell us what you know, tell us how you did that. So this is, from what I know, the first team of Aggies to get accepted to Y Combinator. We're very excited for them. They all quit their jobs. They had to move to Silicon Valley. They're in the process of doing that as of today still, and texted me right before I got in here. But it's very exciting because what you want is role models, right? You need people to come back like Graham Weston has done in San Antonio. You need to be the shining beacon of this can be done and you can do it too. And so we have every intention of helping them find a place to live, helping them find supporters for food and whatnot, because it's very expensive to just up and move there. And with the expectation they're going to come back and they're going to be shining beacons for more like them. So that happened on Monday, and then 2 days ago we had an exit acquisition, and so that was a non-Aggie company, but it's one that I worked with at South by. I get a lot of companies through Greg Wright. I've been doing this for, I think, 7 or 8 years now. And Greg's a Houston guy, runs Hatch Pitch. And so I get to work with some of the universities around the nation, their accelerators, clients, and learn what they're learning as clients. And then I get to add our secret sauce. And a lot of times our secret sauce is a pitch coach from Houston named Chris Westfall. And Chris has coached both our 2016 team and our 2023 team that won Rice Business Plan Challenge. And so he's coached most of our companies that raised funding. Secret asset, but not a secret anymore, right? But Chris is a great guy, and he's very active with most of the colleges at A&M who are doing anything entrepreneurial.
Where is Hatch Pitch located?
In Houston.
Oh, they are? Okay. I haven't run across them.
We do a lot with Houston. We always have, and Austin and San Antonio. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to learn from what everybody else is doing. And so I've visited, at Graham Weston's expense, 140 accelerators around the world, and co-working spaces and dormcubators and creative spaces. So trying to learn what's the ideal model for this. And what I found is we're doing a good job in Texas.
So tell me a little bit more about that. I mean, sounds like you've done a lot of research in this topic. What is Texas good at right now, or what have you found out?
What I found out was a lot of what we're doing in Texas is global level. It's high quality, top shelf programming, investing, and startup launches, talent pipelines. It's all there. We're just not talking about it in a cohesive, united way. Now, Capital Factory did a manifesto, Josh Baer's manifesto. He tried to sort of organize that. But just like universities, colleges are siloed, accelerators are siloed often.
Venture is very siloed still that
exactly.
I've seen, yeah.
But so what I saw in Europe, and I've been to Croatia, been to Malta, been to Vienna, Austria, Sweden. Stockholm was probably the most progressive, and of course they were known as the capital of the unicorns. What they're doing that's different than what we're doing here is they're doing a very intense, coordinated effort to combine creativity, engineering, and business. And if you have that creativity part, then it's like the glue that brings together energy or engineering, and business. It's two polar opposites, but the creativity part is sort of the glue, the binding agent. So that's what I saw. Is we just, you can't run a company with all engineers. You can, but it's not going to be great. It's not going to be sustainable. So you want to add business. Well, you need to add creativity too, and then you'll have magic.
That's interesting because that's really Steve Jobs' point, right? Was at least for him and for Apple was being like the intersection of like the humanities and technology.
Now, Graham Weston said that once, and he sponsored our freshman program. He was one of the main sponsors, and he told the students if he had to do it over again, he would have got a liberal arts or humanities degree.
Interesting.
He felt like this, understanding the psychology, recognizing pattern recognition and history behind entrepreneurship, like cycles. He felt like that would have been really beneficial. That's why I like lifelong learning because, ways of doing things changes. What we did at Startup Aggieland in 2010, I would do completely different now, but use the same business model. But the students have changed, right? The entrepreneurs have changed, and we were already heading down a path of working with non-students or beginners or veterans. And so we talked about, you and I talked about earlier, if we got a freshman team, we would put gray hair on it. If we got a bunch of old guys who had retired from NASA, which happened a lot, we would put young interns on it because sometimes you can't get investors to invest in 60-year-old founders. But if there's a front man or front woman who's young and energetic and looks coachable and manageable, they're going to be more interested. If we went back and charted the path of Startup Aggieland and then designed Spark Innovation Center and then 1876 Ventures, you're going to see a pattern, right?
And so 1876 Ventures, it sounds like a venture fund, but it sounds like it's more than that. So
it is more than that.
Tell a little bit more about what 1876 Ventures does.
Startup Aggieland is the perfect brand, and you know immediately what you do, right? In 2 words, you know it's where it is and you know what it does. 1876 Ventures sounds like a venture fund, right? And we do have a little fund, thanks to some generous former board members at Startup Aggieland. They also liked what we were learning, and so they put up some money. At some point, I hope it does have a fund, and so that's why we went with that name, but also because I didn't want to, replicate the past. If they offered me, like, come back, let's reboot Startup Aggieland, I would be there in a minute, because what we have learned now collectively, we've got 300 mentors in our stable right now. Most of them were involved at Startup Aggieland. When you have that type of brand identity at a university, it's like a magnet for donors and for investors and for HR recruiters. And so, when you've got 1876 Ventures off campus, well, it worked only because there was a legacy between myself and the 300 mentors that we had. There's, still that identity recognition, but we're not going to live forever, right? And so what you want is a legacy project at the university. That would be my recommendation.
And 1876 because?
It's the year that A&M was founded.
Okay, sorry.
And it's not trademarked. And it's got a pretty good trademark library.
Okay.
This coming, Okay, there's been a property identified. The McFerrin Family Foundation has given a huge donation. A&M has approved this. The A&M system regents have approved the investment into a Lassonde-type dormcubator with a makerspace and faculty offices and big co-working. So that's coming.
That sounds great. So Shelly, I know you're a lifelong learner, and I love that. That's something that I also coach so many people on. And you're passionate about entrepreneurship. With the rise of the gig economy, I mean, what advice do you have, for students looking to navigate and succeed in this evolving job market?
Yes, I'm a lifelong learner, and I encourage anybody who wants a fresh start or a fresh mindset to come back. And that's very common now with the veterans that are joining. But with the gig economy, it's a different approach to entrepreneurship than when we started doing this in 2010 to 2012. The students are different post-COVID. And so what I would tell people now is that if you're in this space that I'm in, you have to approach entrepreneurship slightly differently than we did. It's not greed is good anymore. It's about impact. It's about sustainability. It's about making a difference with your life on some scale. It doesn't have to be big corporate. It may just be my little job on a mountaintop from my laptop, kind of thing, or my phone. The students now want to have an impact, and they don't necessarily want to show up at a 9-to-5 job in a cubicle. They want to work from remote places. They want to have flexibility to travel. So if you can speak to that as an entrepreneurship program and you can embrace it, I think it's super healthy for any age to get out of your bubble from time to time, to go out and see how the world's solving problems. I'm very pro study abroad, and A&M leads in that regard as far as getting 5,600 students, I think, annually into study abroad programs. But if you don't know how the other person is solving a problem, or that they're even working on a problem that you're maybe trying to work on, you don't know if you're behind the curve or onto something new. And so just getting out and embracing the gig economy, embracing the gig university, we're the original gig university, and not supporting the students in their quest to be entrepreneurs at any level, whether it's influencing. I know student influencers that have been in our program that they were getting 10 million views, and they were making 100,000 a year as students from doing YouTube videos. We called them our YouTubers, and great entrepreneurs. We had one that's doing it with promotion for brands, right? And they're using social media, and they're making a ton of money doing it. There's nothing wrong with that. It's still very entrepreneurial. And so I think if you were going to do a program now, to embrace that gig economy for whatever age you're working with, and maybe that's just where they start. Maybe they realize, okay, I do have the skills, I do have the chops to go out and do something on my own. How can I build on this? Can I hire more people to help me do it? Can we scale this concept, or can we do something slightly different? Maybe I can apply this to research. What if I've got the switch list guys right now, all engineers? So I want to add a recent graduate who's coming from liberal arts. He is amazing at marketing and using online, promotion, and they need to get their product out. They need to raise some funding. They need to go into manufacturing. And so I think having those combined is going to make a difference. But it's a new world. It's not, the same world it was when we launched Startup Aggieland. And that was one reason for the 1876 change, too, just to distinguish that we're doing things slightly differently. We've been updating our website. We had taken it down when we were doing RS Design Spark, graciously supported by Lindsley Ruth, who was the CEO of RS Group at the time. That should go up this weekend or next week, but you'll see the difference in what we're doing versus Startup Aggieland. We didn't add programs. We pared down the programs and we enhanced them. One of the things that campuses and universities and communities and towns have a problem with is coordination. If you're new to town and you want to be an entrepreneur, I tell everybody go find the local Startup Grind chapter, because that's a good starting point. It can be something else. Maybe it's 1 million cups, because we would do those both at RS Design Spark and Startup Aggieland. We had a nighttime program with Startup Grind, and we had the daytime with 1 million cups. So at some point you can find a connection in either one of those. But at a university, where do you go? I mean, what building that's 10 stories tall, what beige brick facility do you go into? I don't know, And so you need just like the Woodlands had a visitor center, Houston probably has the, Chamber of Commerce or the Houston Greater Partnership. You know where to go. And so universities need something like that too. The ION is perfect for Rice. You know where to go to find help, at least get started.
So that's interesting. I mean, if you're someone who's listening and you are someone that has done side gigs and side jobs, you just might be an entrepreneur, right? And so seek out some of these accelerator programs that exist now, and chapters like Start Grind and 1876 Ventures, and see how far you can go with that. Well, Shelly, thanks for being on the podcast. It's been super interesting, and everything that you're doing to forge the future here in Texas. Do you have some socks for you?
Oh, thank you.
I like my socks. I've got my...
I know she had Yoda on
I got my Mandalorian socks. I've got rocket socks for you.
Oh, perfect.
You've always, you're involved in, the rocket is kind of the unofficial startup mascot.
Right? And we work with NASA on our space startup camp.
Yeah, exactly. Which
I'll wear this for camp. So thank you for the socks.
Well, absolutely.
This is awesome.
Thanks for coming on the show. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Me too. I appreciate it, Chris.
Yeah.